Dawn Momohara was just 19 years old when her life was stolen on what should have been a night of celebration. On March 21st, 1977, in Honolulu, Hawaii, Dawn was enjoying her birthday with friends. She had her entire future ahead of her, bright, full of promise, and loved deeply by her family. But when the party ended and the night fell quiet, something unimaginable happened. Dawn never made it home. At first, friends assumed she might have stayed out late, but by morning, alarm set in. She was the kind of young woman who kept her word, who never simply disappeared without telling her family where she was going. The hours ticked by, and unease grew into dread. When investigators were alerted, the search began immediately. But what they would discover shocked even seasoned detectives. Dawn had not run away. She hadn't gotten lost. She had been brutally murdered. Her body was found the very next day. The horror of her death sent shockwaves through Honolulu. Who could have done this to a teenager celebrating her birthday? Why would anyone want to end her life so violently? And as her grieving family demanded answers, one haunting truth began to emerge. The person responsible had walked away, free. The clock started ticking on a case that would go unsolved for nearly half a century. The discovery of Dawn Momohara's body, the day after her birthday, sent shockwaves through Honolulu. The vibrant young woman, who had been celebrating just hours earlier, was now the victim of a brutal crime. Police quickly launched an investigation, but from the beginning, they faced devastating challenges. There were no eyewitnesses who had seen Dawn's final moments. No one could pinpoint who she had left the gathering with, or whether she had been forced away. The crime scene itself was barren of clues. No clear fingerprints, no definitive trail to follow. Detectives knew they were racing against time, but the silence surrounding her death was suffocating. Friends and family were interviewed extensively. Everyone was desperate to find some clue, some detail that could explain who would want to harm a girl so full of life. Rumors swirled through the community. Had she been targeted by a stranger? Was this someone she knew? Could it have been a crime of passion or something more calculated? The police chased every lead, but none held. Witness reports conflicted, tips fizzled, and evidence seemed to vanish into thin air. As the weeks passed, the trail grew colder. What began as an urgent manhunt slowly transformed into a painful, waiting game. For Dawn's family, the anguish was unbearable. They lived with the torment of knowing that the person who had taken their daughter's life was still out there, free to walk among them. Birthdays came and went, each one a cruel reminder of what was stolen. For her parents, there was no closure, only endless questions and a hollow ache that deepened as years slipped by. By the end of the 1970s, Dawn's case had grown cold. It would sit in evidence rooms and case files for decades, unsolved, gathering dust, while her family fought to keep her memory alive. But what they didn't know was that science itself would one day breathe new life into the investigation. The world had changed since 1977, and technology had advanced. And nearly 48 years later, that silence around Dawn's case was finally about to break. For nearly half a century, the name Dawn Momohara lingered in Honolulu's memory as a haunting reminder of an unsolved tragedy. Her family grew older, carrying their grief like a shadow, never knowing who had destroyed their daughter's life. The case file sat in storage, yellowing with time, while the community wondered if justice would ever come. But time has a way of bending toward truth. By the 2020s, a revolution in forensic science was sweeping across cold case units nationwide. DNA testing, genetic genealogy, and advanced databases were reopening doors that had been slammed shut for decades. Investigators in Honolulu decided to revisit Dawn's case, this time armed with technology that didn't exist in 1977. It started with preserved evidence. Items collected from the crime scene, long considered inconclusive, were carefully re-examined with cutting-edge methods. Where detectives in the 70s saw dead ends, modern scientists found possibilities. Trace DNA, tiny, nearly invisible, was now enough to paint a genetic profile. And then, the turning point. In early 2025, investigators revealed that they had identified a suspect. After 48 years of silence, a name finally emerged, a man long overlooked, now linked to Dawn's murder through the power of forensic science. His arrest shook the community, not just because of the crime itself, but because it proved what many had nearly stopped believing, that even after decades, the truth could not remain hidden forever. For Dawn's surviving family, the news was bittersweet. Relief that a suspect had been found, anger that it had taken almost half a century, grief that Dawn herself was not here to see the justice she deserved. And yet, this breakthrough rekindled hope. After so many years of darkness, there was finally a light. But identifying a suspect was only the beginning. The next question loomed: would this long-awaited arrest actually lead to justice, or would the case, burdened by time and fading memories, collapse under the weight of the past? In January 2025, nearly 5 decades after Dawn Momohara's murder, Honolulu police made an announcement that stunned the community. An arrest had finally been made. The suspect, a man who had lived freely all these years, was now facing charges for a crime committed in 1977. For Dawn's family, the news was surreal. The face of the man accused of killing their daughter was not that of a stranger to the world. It was someone who had walked the same streets, lived a normal life, while they carried unspeakable grief. To think that he had evaded justice for so long filled them with both relief and anger. The arrest was the product of persistence. Cold case detectives, refusing to let Dawn's memory fade, had leveraged modern DNA technology to finally connect the evidence left behind at the crime scene to the man now in custody. The science was irrefutable, something investigators in the 1970s could never have imagined. But while the breakthrough was extraordinary, it was not the end of the battle. Decades had passed, witnesses had aged, memories had blurred, and physical evidence was limited. Prosecutors knew they faced challenges bringing a case this old to trial. The defense undoubtedly would argue that too much time had elapsed, that evidence was too weak, and that the accused should walk free. Still, for the Momohara family, the arrest meant more than legal strategy. It meant Dawn's story had not been forgotten. It meant that the little girl they had loved so dearly was not just another name in a file. It meant, at last, there was a chance to look the person responsible in the eyes and demand accountability. As news spread across Hawaii, the community reacted with shock and a renewed sense of outrage. Some had nearly forgotten Dawn's name, while others had carried the weight of her unsolved murder for decades. The arrest was more than justice for one family. It was a reminder to every victim's family that hope should never be abandoned. But the question still lingered in the air. Would justice truly be served after nearly 48 years of waiting? For 48 years, the name Dawn Momohara lingered in silence, a wound in the heart of her family and a cold shadow over Honolulu. Her life was cut short on her 19th birthday, and for decades it seemed the person who had taken her future had escaped without consequence. But now, with the arrest in 2025, that silence has finally been broken. Her parents did not live to see this moment. Time robbed them of the chance to watch justice unfold. But for her surviving relatives, the arrest brought a bittersweet relief. Their fight to keep Dawn's story alive had not been in vain. At last, someone would be forced to answer for the violence that had stolen their daughter, their sister, their loved one. Yet, justice is not guaranteed. Trials are long, evidence can be challenged, and the passing of time makes everything harder. But the fact that a suspect is finally behind bars after nearly half a century shows the extraordinary power of persistence, technology, and a family's refusal to let go of hope. Dawn's story is not just about tragedy, it's about the resilience of memory. It's about the power of a community to keep asking questions, even when the world moves on. And it's about how modern science is rewriting history, proving that no matter how much time has passed, the truth can still come to light. Dawn should have grown old, lived her dreams, and celebrated countless birthdays. Instead, her name became a symbol of patience, heartbreak, and the long pursuit of justice. And now, her story reminds us of something vital. We must never stop remembering those who vanish or are taken too soon. For Dawn Momohara, the fight for justice continues in the courtroom. And while her life was stolen, her memory cannot be erased. If this story moved you, help keep Dawn's voice alive. Like this video, comment your thoughts, share her story with others, and subscribe so that more unsolved cases can be told, more names remembered, and more justice pursued, because no one should ever be forgotten.